Hi everyone, today I'm going to be talking about my most anticipated games due for release in 2021. Now I'm fully aware that 2020 isn't over yet and I still have a ton of games to play and review from this year. However, I don't think there's ever been a time where in December of the previous year, like now, where I've had such an extensive list of games due for release in the next year that I'm so excited for. So before too many mount up, I thought I'd rather talk about these bunch, and then, as more and more games are released, or information about them is released, I can potentially make a second list. But before I get started about these games, I'm going to just say a quick thank you to some patrons of mine. Mike France, who very kindly backed me this week. Thank you to Mike, Patrick Einhaber and Timothy Ball as well, who are kind of long-term supporters of the show. So thank you very much for those, and obviously if you do want to support the channel, I'd very much welcome that, and visit my Patreon page. I'll leave the link below for that one. But let's crack on. I'll say that none of these games have or are in a particular order. However, I think I've saved my most anticipated one for last place here, but the others are kind of in a random order. So let's get started. So first up I have Carnegie, which is due for release by Quined Games and by designer Javier Jorge, who avid Eurogame fans may recognise from designs such as Trois and Black Angel. So that alone has piqued my attention, but also what's really piqued my attention is the artwork by Ian O'Toole, which is absolutely stunning to look at. But also the premise of the games. The idea is that we are these business moguls trying to run as successful as a company as we can, and getting victory points to signify that. It sounds like it's going to be a pretty involved game, as you're building your empire. But I love that idea. Being a mogul, that economic edge to it, and that side of industry. So that really appeals to me. And yeah, more importantly, as I said, the designer is top quality. So really looking forward to that one. Next up, again, it wouldn't be a chairman of the board video if it wasn't for Stefan Feld, or if Stefan Feld wasn't involved. So there are a few Stefan Feld titles due out. First up being Cocopeli. Now Cocopeli is due for release by Queen Games, and it's being touted as a 40 to 60 minute game for 2 to 4 players. But more interestingly, I know a lot of people who've played this game on some of the tabletop simulators and the online gaming platforms have said that if you didn't know this was a Stefan Feld game, then you really wouldn't signify it to being his, because it's so different to his normal designs. It looks like it's more card driven than his other games, and so there's a lot of kind of hand management involved. But it looks really interesting. I quite like the art style, and really intrigued to see how different this one feels to his other titles. In addition to Cocopeli coming out, Queen Games have also launching Amsterdam and Hamburg from the City Collection. These were Kickstarters from this year that are basically re-implementations of some of his famous games that are very hard to get hold of now. So these two particularly are re-implementations of Macau and Bruges, which are games I've been wanting to get my hands on for a long time, and very happy that I'm going to be able to do that this year. So naturally, very excited for that. Next up, I have Dark Ages. So Dark Ages is right up there for me in terms of most anticipated, because this one is by Board and Dice, who are quickly becoming one of my favourite publishers. Designers for this one are Adam Kwapinski and Andrzej Nowak, who are fairly known designers. Got quite a good reputation. But the most intriguing thing about this one is that it's essentially a dudes on the map game, where you have this huge map of Europe, obviously set in the Dark Ages, which again I personally really like. But it's a Euro-based dudes on the map game, so you are building your own little civilization. Trying to manage your resources, build up your defenses in Euro methods. So there's loads of different paths you can go down to get points, but that kind of with a hybrid combination of the kind of dice rolling combat is really quite intriguing for me. And dice rolling combat is not something I tend to go for or something that interests me. But the fact that you can upgrade your troops to do different things, and I don't think it's all about the combat in this one. It's not just a run into each other and smash the hell out of each other. It's very much based on the infrastructure of your little dynasty. So extremely intrigued by this one, and there's 2 different versions as well. So you can actually combine the two different versions to make a super version and play up to, I think, 8 players. So if you want a gargantuan game, you can actually do that and play with a lot of players. But alternatively, you can just play either version with 4 players. So extremely excited to see how that one plays on the table. Next up, I have Zapotec. Zapotec is, again, by Board and Dice, which is intriguing in itself. But this one is designed by Fabio Lopiano, who has had a big hit this year with Merv, Heart of the Silk Road. That one's done very well, and I'm yet to play it, but I'm due to play it very shortly. So that's intriguing. He's also come up with other games such as I forget what it's called, but this one is based on that kind of bygone age of that South American vibe, which Board and Dice are quite famous for. Bring out games in that kind of era, But yeah, I'm just intrigued to see what this one does differently. I think it's more card-driven than the other titles in that kind of line by Board and Dice, but it's got your kind of traditional resource management as well, and it's actually being touted as a 60 to 75 minute game, which in itself is intriguing, because if it's on the heavier side of things, to have a time stamp of that duration is always a good thing. Next up, I have an expansion with Teotihuacan expansion period. Teotihuacan is right up there with my favourite games, and another expansion for that one is going to get my attention. This one is modular. I think there's lots of different ways you can increase the complexity of the game, such as what have I got? You got wild resource in this one, and I think there's also a modification to the central or starting area, or the palace I think it is called, on the board. So whenever you pass it, you might be able to do different things and have different actions to add a bit more variability there. So yeah, more content for your favourite games is always a good thing. Next up, I have Let's Waltz, which is another expansion. This one is for the Grand Austria Hotel, which, if you watched my top 50 games this year, it was actually at number 4, so it actually increased this year. A game, the more and more I play, the more and more I enjoy. But this one's, considering the game is quite a few years old now, it's always interesting that an expansion comes out that many years after to inject more life into the game, and interesting to see what this one does. Again, a bit like the Teotihuacan expansion, I think this one is modular, where you can kind of tailor the game to your needs and what you want at the time. So you can always play with just a module or two, or throw them all in for something quite a bit heavier. But yeah, really interested in that one. Next up, I have Golem by Brasini, Gili and Luciani, who are amongst my absolute top tier designers. And talking about Grand Austria Hotel, this game is actually the explanation of it is said that it's inspired by Grand Austria Hotel. So that is super cool and super intriguing. This one's based on the Golem of Prague. It looks like it's a very engine builder style game, but it has this element where I think there's literally like a 3D component where you drop these marbles into, and it divides them into different kind of pools. And I think you're selecting your actions based on those pools. So I'm a bit of speculation there, but if a game has those designers on them, Cranio Creation design, inspired by one of my favourite games of all time, then it ticks all the boxes. So naturally, it's going to be right up there for me in terms of being the most anticipated. So really excited to see what this one does differently, and hopefully it does do something quite a bit different to Grand Austria Hotel, but still having some of those mechanisms that really make that game great. Next up, I have something a bit different with Lawyer Up. Now, Lawyer Up is not a game I know a tremendous amount about, but the idea of the game is what really intrigues me, because this is a 2-player only game where one player is kind of representing the prosecution and one player is representing the defense in these different lawsuits, and you are essentially trying to give evidence to the jury, and obviously the defense is trying to almost rebuke that evidence in order to sway their decision. And I think there's a few different kind of cases that you can play through, and I think they're all replayable as well. So it's not like it's a one and done scenario. Just the idea is super cool, and I love that kind of that courtroom drama. So I don't know too much about these designers, Samuel Bailey and Mike Grenade. I don't know anything about them. Being published by Rock Manor Games, but the idea itself is what intrigues me about this one. Next up, I have Eternal Palace by Stephen Aramini. Now, Stephen Aramini is a designer of a lot of very small card games, such as Sprawlopolis, Circle the Wagons. I know those are really great games, but this one is your bigger Euro-style game set in the Far East. I think the idea is that we are almost restoring these different artifacts and buildings and, all that kind of artistic stuff. But it's being touted as a dice placement game, so dice placement is one of my favourite mechanisms ever, and the fact that that's combined with Stephen Aramini, I'm just interested to see his take on that kind of genre of games. It looks nice, but in kind of a micro view of the game, I don't know too much about it, don't know about the mechanics and how it works, but on those facts alone, definitely going to get my attention. Next up, I have Mercado de Las Boa, which is coming out by Eagle Griffin Games, who are normally known for their huge productions, and games by Vital Lacerda. And this is actually a Vital Lacerda game with a co-designer, Julian Pombo. But in contrast to a lot of Lacerda games, this one is only 30 minutes. And it's basically a small abstract style game where you are trying to attract customers to your market stall and I suppose sell them goods and get points that way and money. But yeah, just that take on or a Lacerda game where you've not got the multiple different cogs working together, you're just simply focusing on one aspect of or one mechanism of a game rather than having a bunch of them together and having to absolutely pull your hair out and trying to understand the rules. So yeah, really intrigued to see what's to come for this kind of line of games by Vital Lacerda. Is he going to start focusing on smaller games, or at least show a bit of attention on that side of things rather than just the huge productions? So yeah, interested to try that one. Next up, I have Brazil Imperial, designed by Zé Mendes and published by Meeple BR. This one is a 1 to 4 player game, 60 to 90 minutes, but the interesting thing about that is that it's being touted as a Euro 4X game. So 4X is your expand, exploit, exterminate, and explore. So you've got those mechanisms which are normally synonymous with those kind of Ameritrash style games, but interested to see how the Euro side of things come into this one. I think this designer is not someone who's got a big catalogue of games, so pretty much a brand new designer. So interesting to see if he's going to kind of stamp some authority on the hobby, to see if he comes up with something to make a statement and see what his interpretation of a Euro 4X game is. So don't quite know how it plays. There's some pictures out there about how it looks, and it certainly looks interesting and it looks well put together. So hopefully it's as good as I hope it can be. So that is Brazil Imperial. Next up, I have Cora. Cora by Yellow Games, designed by David Chapelet and Jocelyn Millett. This one is a civilization building game, but it's dice driven. So I think you are basically rolling dice. I don't know if you're collecting resources or building things. Hopefully there's some good mitigation here and different paths to take. Again, not a game that has a lot of information out, but I was actually expecting this one to be released in 2020. But obviously, it wasn't as developed as initially expected. But Yellow Games tend to put out really nice productions. I love the box cover for this one, and hopefully, again, it's something that's accessible but still has a bit of meat on the bones. And for a civilization game to play in 60 to 90 minutes is going to be a good thing. Next up, I have Whale Riders. Now, Whale Riders was a Kickstarter from this year by Rainer Knizia. So I love Rainer Knizia games, and I know a lot of his titles, especially in recent years. Some of them are quite hit and miss, but this one looks like a bit of a throwback to his more classic designs as you are travelling down this, I suppose, this map of these glaciers, I suppose. trying to accumulate resources. You're buying and selling things, I suppose getting points in different ways, but it has this almost race aspect where obviously you want to beat opponents to get to the resources that you want, and I think there's bonuses as well to kind of get back to where you started from, but hopefully it's a good accessible gateway game and something on that medium light side of things, but in the top of all that, there's some amazing artwork assigned to this one by Vincent Dutray, who is just a brilliant artist, and I love the aesthetic. Hopefully the mechanics aren't overwrought in any way and just gives you that classic Knizia feel, but with a new fresh of paint. Next up, I have Maharaja, which is by one of my favourite design duos, Kramer and Kiesling, published by Cranio Creations. This one is a reprint of Maharaja, so the same title. One of their games I've never played, but this one has a whole visual overhaul, lovely artwork to it. It's an area control game, which Kramer and Kiesling do a great job of. I think this one you're kind of travelling around this map of India, I believe, trying to put influence down in these different towns and cities to get points. I think there's an element of unique player powers here, or you have powers from turn to turn, but always interested to try some of their classic designs, and hopefully it's as good as their other titles. So interested to try that one, and so I've never really been let down by them before, and Maharaja is hopefully no exception to that. Next up, I have Fruticular by Giovanni Fiore and Virginio Gili. This one is a 45 to 60 minute farming game, worker placement as well. This one I think you're collecting these different fruits and stuff in order to create jams and kind of, that kind of thing. I think it has an economic element to it, a bit of a market element, as you are, I suppose, going through a motion, bit of an engine, and selling things as you produce these jams and things. I like the idea of the theme. It sounds nice and accessible. 45 to 60 minutes. I think it's gone a bit under the radar. I didn't really take off on Kickstarter, but the production looks really nice. So you've got some really nice little fruit components and things, and hopefully these designers, particularly Virginio Gili, he's never really fallen below a certain quality control element for me. He's always made amazing designs. And Fruticular, like I said, although it's not been had a lot of spotlight on it, hopefully it can still maintain that standard and secure a place on my shelf. Next up, I have Rise and Fall. This is by Christoph Berlinger, published by Ludically. This one looks extremely interesting, as you have this, I suppose, map of all these different terrains. They are, I suppose, they're hexes or octagons, and you are... I don't know the mechanics, but the board itself is built up of layers, so I think you're actually forming the landscape and the territory as you go throughout. It says in the description that it's a no luck game, so hopefully there is it sounds like it's going to be quite abstract in that sense. I think the way you're going to be scoring points is based on area control or area majority. But that whole 3D aspect to it, where I said you were literally building up from the sea to the mountains, it looks really impressive, has a nice amount of table presence, and hopefully the gameplay itself is equal to how good and interesting it looks. So yeah, very intriguing. And finally, at this point, definitely my most anticipated game of next year is Darwin's Journey by Simone Luciani and Mangoni. This one, published by Thundergriff Games, is a worker movement game, kind of a point-to-point fashion, based on Darwin's kind of voyage of the Galapagos Islands, which I think is a great theme and something that should be exploited more, because there's not actually that many games based on that. But I love the idea of travelling around these islands, getting these different kind of samples and things, researching them. I think you're putting things in museums. The board itself looks like there's a hell of a lot going on, and it looks right up my alley. I think whenever Simone Luciani's name is on a box, I think the the pedigree of that design is just instantly raised. My expectations instantly go up because I think his name is just a hallmark for a fantastic game at this point, because he is right up there with the best of the best. That tied in with that amazing, interesting theme, discovery, all the different species and animals. I think that is just a recipe for a great design. Being due for release in January, so keep an eye out for that one. And from what I understand at this point, it's going to be shipped out to people in the same year, because it is being touted as a 2021 game. So hopefully there's no delays or anything like that involved, and we're actually going to get this to the table in 2021, because I am certainly excited for it. So that concludes this rendition of my most anticipated games for 2021. As I said, there may be a second version down the road. I don't know yet, but normally there's loads of games released or information about new games coming out in January and February of the same year, whereas these are obviously advanced or announced quite a bit in advance. So hopefully there's something on here that's really piqued your interest. Certainly has for me. If you have enjoyed the video, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and as I said at the beginning, please check out my Patreon as well. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.